Number one is the Bears. You know, I thought we had rock bottom coming into this week for the Bears, Evan, but we didn't. They put up 3 points at home against the lowly Patriots in a 19-3 loss. The good news for the Bears and their fans and their team is that our long national nightmare is over. As a result of that loss on Tuesday morning, the Bears announced that Shane Waldron, aka Shane Fraudron, is out. I mean, just a terrible hire from the outset. There's a video going viral now of Jackson Smith and Jigba over the summer, basically saying Fraudron didn't know what he was doing in Seattle. This team was 31st in yards per play with Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift, Cole Kmet. Evan, what was your reaction to the Shane Waldron firing on Tuesday morning?
It probably came a few weeks too late. I mean, the Bears were playing legitimately good football on both sides of the ball. They're in their 3 games heading into their bye week. Something must have happened during the bye week because they have been like the worst team in the NFL in the 3 games since their bye. I don't even want to say in fairness because we're not letting Shane Waldron off the hook, but because he was terrible and he deserved to lose his job. But the Bears were without 4 starting offensive linemen on Sunday. When they lost Tevin Jenkins to an in-game injury, they came in without their starting right guard, starting left tackle, and their starting right tackle. And their only starter left was Coleman Shelton, their center, who is not good. Mm-hmm. So the Patriots were able to take advantage of that, obviously. 9 sacks. I mean, this is like a worse environment than what Drake May has. And people were like, oh, you can't put Drake May in because of the environment. The environment in Chicago was worse, and that's even with Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, and Keenan Allen. It's just a complete disaster. And, they had one of the easiest schedules in the first half of the season. According to ESPN stats and info, they have the hardest schedule the rest of the way. So it's going to get worse.
Yeah. So I think anytime you fail badly like this, it's never one thing, right? And I think Shane Waldron has been incompetent. It's never one thing. On the offensive line stuff, the only thing that I would say is it's awful, right? I mean, they're 29th in Brandon Thorne's midseason rankings, but the Commanders were 32nd coming into this season in Brandon Thorne's offensive line rankings. Jaden Daniels elevated that. Cliff Kingsbury, as much as I've given him a hard time, he's done a great job scheming around that. Also, the scheme had Caleb looking lost. There were cut-ups of Caleb dropping back, hitting his back foot, and just not getting the ball out, even though guys are open for first downs. And people are like, listen, man, Caleb looks awful. Caleb looks worse than Drake May, worse by a mile than Jaden Daniels, worse than all these other guys that went after him. I mean, Caleb is playing at league worst levels, and I'm sure some of that is Waldron. I'm sure some of that is the offensive line. But Evan, do you have any concerns about Caleb at this point?
I mean, I have concerns about him developing bad habits. We saw him do that his final season in college, and he, had made a bunch of errors his final season in college.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I have concerns about him developing bad habits. I don't have concerns about his talent. I think he's got plenty of ability. But this situation, Kurt Warner and Chase Daniel have talked about how Shane Waldron was just giving him nothing easy to do. Everything's difficult. Everything looks hard. It looks hard to complete a pass, and that's how you get your offensive coordinator fired.
Okay, the new offensive coordinator will be Thomas Brown. Thomas Brown was this team's passing game coordinator. He is now the offensive coordinator. Thomas Brown was the offensive coordinator for Bryce Young in 2023. I mean, my God. And we know how that went. That went as bad as it can possibly go. So, like Evan said, schedule is tough. Offensive line woes aren't getting any better. I'm not sure Thomas Brown solves anything. Evan, what do you think about any changes that Thomas Brown could make and if it'll matter?
Thomas Brown is a McVay guy. Those guys have had success. Guess who was also a McVay guy? Shane Fraudron.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think so. I think that they'll try to lean heavily on the run. That could potentially be good news for DeAndre Swift, who's had a nice season. He's been one of the few bright spots on the Bears. Pat Thorman did note in our private Slack that the Bears were playing fast, from a tempo standpoint, obviously not playing well, but they're playing with tempo. And last year when Thomas Brown was in there calling plays for Carolina played really, really slow.
Yeah.
So that's one change. I don't know that, you're going to be able to fix it right now.
So I've lost unconscionable amounts of money on Rome Odunze this year. I continued to play. I had a team this week where I played Caleb and Rome, and like I'm just real tempted to cut my losses here and just like stop martingaling it. Like they just seem totally broken, and I'll be so sick to my stomach if they come out and hit one of these weeks in a big way. It's just really, really hard to see it right now. So yeah, it's ugly, but kudos to them. At least they made the right move, and Eberflus got his scapegoat, or whatever people want to say. All right, let's go to a more positive story. Number 2 story of the week comes out of San Francisco. 49ers come out of their bye with everyone healthy except for Brandon Ayuk. Surprisingly scuffled in Tampa a bit, but Purdy still goes off for 26 fantasy points. They win the game 23-20. The big story was the return of Christian McCaffrey, and I didn't know exactly how they'd play it. I thought they'd ease him in a little bit. I think we had him for like 75% of a normal workload. He had like 100% of a normal workload in this game. 56 of 64 snaps, 51 in the backfield, 5 slaughter wide, 33 routes for McCaffrey on 42 Purdy dropbacks, 7 targets for a 19% share. That is like classic Christian McCaffrey usage. Evan, what did you think about how CMC looked in his return, and any more 49ers thoughts?
Yeah, his snaps were like, I mean, he only didn't play on like 7 of the
Yep.
offensive snaps, I believe. I
Yep.
think he was 54 of 61 or something like that.
56 of 64 I had, yeah.
Okay.
And it's just normal usage. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, he wasn't efficient on the ground, but he looked great in the receiving game. He looked great after the catch. I feel great about Christian McCaffrey going forward. This is, finally some optimism on Christian McCaffrey. I mean, it sucked. He was out for the first like 9 weeks of the season.
Right. And you see how you hit a massive ceiling, and why Christian McCaffrey, I thought, was worth the risk to take number 1 overall. I didn't think the risk was that great, which was a mistake. I talked about that a ton on the solo pod. You can go back to week 1 or week 2 for that. But because he can get 15 to 25% of the targets every single week, and then also get 15, 16 carries, and then also be the primary goal line back. He had that long streak of consecutive games with a touchdown that ended late last year. So, I'm hesitant to say that I'd rather have him than Saquon, or rather have him than Derrick Henry because of the health stuff. But if he does stay healthy and he is himself, he will project better than those guys rest of season for sure. Other big news out of San Francisco, Evan, was we finally got a look at the wide receivers with everyone healthy except Ayuk. On 42 Brock Purdy dropbacks, it was Juwan Jennings, Deebo Samuel, and Ricky Pearsall in the 3 wide receiver set. Jennings led the way with 40 routes, then Deebo 35, then Pearsall 30. Both Jennings and Pearsall made really good plays. I mean, people are talking about Juwan Jennings being a top 12 wide receiver the rest of the season, Evan. I understand. I don't want to go too far on it, but dude has been balling, and he has the clear X role. I mean, he is going to be the every down X role.
Yeah, he just jumped into Brandon Ayuk's role.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the 49ers X receiver, and Kyle Shanahan said after the game he's going to stick in that role going forward. I don't know about top 12, a little hesitant on that, but every week wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside, no question. He's been unbelievable in like contested situations. I thought Pearsall looked good. I really like the way they used him because he's an after catch guy, and they were using him on the cheat motion plays where he gets like a running start. And that's a great use of Ricky Pearsall's skill set. Deebo Samuel needs to chill out. Assaulting the long snapper and place kicker, I get it. Like, they missed 3 field goals. I mean, they did make the game winner. I still, and Kyle Shanahan said everything's fine. I'm not entirely sure. I feel like there might be some pressure on them to suspend him for a game. That was a really bad look.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. We'll see on that. The other note I had in San Francisco was, you can see, we talked on Sunday morning about how the floor on George Kittle gets lower when everyone is out there and healthy. George Kittle only saw 4 targets here, set a season low in target share. Did get the touchdown, though, because he's a beast. But yeah, the floor is going to be lower on Kittle here going forward when everyone's healthy.
He made some sick plays, though.
Man. Oh, he's so good.
Wow, he's so unbelievable.
Good. Number 3 story of the week, we move to Pittsburgh. Steelers move to 7-2 with some late heroics in Washington. It was Russ Wilson to Big Mike Williams with 2 minutes left, 32-yard touchdown to win the game. The story I thought that was going to be a big story was Najee Harris's ankle injury. He was able to get back in the game, though, Mike Tomlin said on Tuesday that it sounds like Najee Harris is going to be fine and be able to play in the game coming up. Meanwhile, I was like, man, it's time for Jaylen Warren. He's been playing better. He's been getting a lot of snaps. Najee's out with this ankle thing. Warren leads him down the field, fumbles going into the end zone. And I was like, oh, and now Najee's ankle is fine. So that is not good. Evan, any thoughts on Steelers win and the Najee Jalen situation going forward?
Well, I think it's become really clear that the Steelers have a defined offensive formula, and that is they're going to run the ball with volume. They don't care if they're being inefficient on the ground. They're going to run the ball. They're going to keep doing it. They obviously have an awesome defense, and Russell Wilson going to be throwing the ball downfield to George Pickens and Mike Williams. On Sunday, his ADOT, Russell Wilson's ADOT was like 13 yards downfield. He only completed 14 passes, but he averaged 7 yards per pass attempt, and he made some big-time throws to Pickens. Pickens has been balling with Russell Wilson. I've said it a couple of times on these shows, but stylistically, those guys are a perfect match, and we've seen that now 3 games in a row. And Mike Williams, he only had 1 target in this game, but he had the game-winning touchdown. His style also really meshes well with Russell Wilson. You remember last year, the Steelers, we kind of knew that they were a fraud. They made the playoffs. They always have the winning record. This year, I mean, I think that they're like a legit, I don't know if I want to go top 5, but like top 8 team in the NFL.
Evan noted that 1 target for Mike Williams. He only played 9 snaps in this whole game. Obviously, he's just getting acclimated. He's going to start playing a ton more, and he is a fit. George Pickens, though, like Evan said, I mean, 25% target share from Russ Wilson in the 3 Russ Wilson games this season. I know Marshawn Lattimore didn't play in this game for the Commanders, which certainly helped George Pickens, but he was balling out there for sure and super impressive here with Russ. Number 4 story of the week takes us to Denver. Chiefs get incredibly lucky again. I don't know how they're doing this, and I don't want to say bad things about the Chiefs. Obviously, they're one of the best teams in the NFL, but they keep getting very, very lucky. They block a short field goal to rip the hearts out of the city of Denver and the Broncos. They're an Arrowhead. I mean, given the talent on this Broncos team, though, which isn't great, and how people felt about Bo Nix, if you're the Broncos, you got to feel really good. You're 5-5 and basically just beat the Chiefs on Sunday, if not for this blocked field goal. The big fantasy story, the reason why this is up here, though, is because they made a move at running back. Evan's boy, Audric Estime, took over for Javonte Williams as the base back here. Snaps were Estime 26, Javonte 17, McLaughlin 7. Opportunities were Estime 14, Javonte 3, McLaughlin 2. So, Evan, thoughts on the running back situation? Any other Broncos thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the concern is that ultimately this team isn't going to score a ton of points. And therefore, if they are, even if Estime is the lead back, if they're still using Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin, then you have a 3-headed monster in an offense that isn't scoring a ton. And that's just going to be really tough to generate confident fantasy starts.
Yeah.
Audric Estime was a beast in college. I know he ran real slow at the combine. But if you look at his other athletic measurables, they were elite for a guy who weighs like 220 plus pounds. And then he went to his pro day and ran 4.54, which is great for his stature. He was also a player who in college was a big back who could hit long runs, but he was never a productive player in the passing game. And so big time limitations here. I mean, it's kind of fun to see a new guy in here because Javonte he had some moments, but he also had some really bad moments. I just don't think that Sean Payton was ever in love with them. I think that, it's kind of fun to have a fresh face, but my expectations are limited. Courtland Sutton has been, a guy who I didn't know if stylistically he was going to be a fit with Bo Nix early in the season. He wasn't, but he's got it together, and he's now a guy that we can rely on to an extent.
Yeah. I've heard like Marshawn Lynch comps on Audric Estime. Obviously, it's like a extreme high-end comp. But when you're on a team that's not going to score a ton of touchdowns, although they do have 2 soft matchups coming up, and you're also unlikely to catch a lot of passes, it's hard to find a ceiling. You're going to have to be super efficient and score some touchdowns on your own. So Daigle and I talked a ton about the Estime situation on the waiver show. Hopefully you guys caught that. But I think some people out there, are probably a little bit more excited about Estime than I would be, even though it's an interesting spot for sure. Yeah, home versus Falcons, and then they play the Raiders the next 2 weeks, do the Broncos. Fifth story of the week takes us to Carolina. 2 wins in a row now for Bryce Young. They got the one over the Saints in week 9. Then on Sunday, they beat the Giants in Germany. The big story to me, though, is this Chuba Hubbard extension. This happened after the show last week. We didn't get a chance to talk about it too much. Evan, Chuba got a 4-year extension through 2028, $15 million guaranteed in new money, $33 million in base value. Now, people are saying this like, oh, you see, Jonathan Brooks, there's something wrong with his knee. And the Panthers knew it. And that's why they gave Chuba Hubbard all this money. I don't really buy that. It is some weird vibes around Jonathan Brooks right now. But Evan, what did you think of Panthers' decision to give Chuba the bag and how that affects Panthers running back going forward?
Yeah, I saw a lot of criticism of this move on Twitter, and I was like, man, it's $8 million.
Yeah.
Only half of it is guaranteed. It's $8 million a year, and only half of the deal is guaranteed. And the guy has been playing his ass off. And I mean, you kind of like you want to reward players like that. I understand that there's always going to be some sort of pushback when teams commit to running backs. I had no problem with this
Yeah.
move, and also I don't. Are there any guarantees on Jonathan Brooks? I mean, no. The guy is behind schedule in his recovery. I mean, we can say that we don't know if his knee's messed up forever, but I mean he's behind schedule for sure. And Chuba Hubbard is like a leader. The coaches love him. He's been playing great. He's been the best player on the team.
Yeah.
So I don't have no problem with this issue whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I expect either way, even if Jonathan Brooks comes back down the stretch, like I expect Chuba Hubbard now to be the lead back and Jonathan Brooks to, maybe like a thunder and lightning sort of situation.
I'm like the first one to go on Twitter and start bashing teams when they give running backs a lot of money. I did not want to do that here. I thought that it was a fine deal. $8 million.
Another thing to consider is like the salary cap is
that's what I was
monstrous.
$255 million cap this year. So at $8 million, and it's going to go up next year. At $8 million a year, you're talking about 3% of your cap to Chuba Hubbard. Panthers have a lot of problems. They made a lot of horrible decisions. This is whatever. It's like, I'm not going to sit here and kill them for this. I do think that trading up for Jonathan Brooks off of an ACL tear when you already had Chuba Hubbard in the second round, that was dumb. That is not what I would have done. And, the Jonathan Brooks thing, I think he's going to be back. Maybe they didn't want to play him in Germany on like an unknown field or whatever. I don't know. I think he's going to be back down the stretch. But like Evan said, I can't picture Jonathan Brooks getting more than 6, 7, 8 carries a game, assuming Chuba's Hubbard the rest of the way in some type of timeshare. So I'm excited to see Jonathan Brooks. I want to see him. I'm rooting for him. It's just skeptical. And yeah, now they've won 2 in a row, and Chuba's been a huge part of that. I mean, Bryce Young only threw for 118 yards in this game on a 60% completion rate, and they won. It's Chuba, and it was the defense playing better. So let's move to the NFC now. We'll go alphabetical order. Start with the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, Cardinals are cooking, man. 31-6 thrashing of the Jets. And by the way, Jets were favored in this game. And the Cardinals just come out and thrash them at home. I think, as we talked about last week on the awards show, Jonathan Gannon has a legit case for Coach of the Year. My bet is on Tomlin, which we talked about last week, but I do think Jonathan Gannon has a case. And then James Conner again blows up here in the passing game. This time, Evan, what do you think of Cardinals' easy win over the Jets on Sunday?
Yeah, it's just, this is what we were hoping from the offense when the season started, and they kind of they flashed this at times, but I mean now they really got it rolling. They've won 4 in a row, I believe.
Yeah.
Heading into their bye, they get that bye week to get healthy. They've been getting some really nice runs out of Trey Benson recently, who started off really slow. You remember how bad he looked in the preseason?
Yeah.
But he's a really talented guy. I mean, some smart analysts thought that he was maybe the best back in the entire draft. And he's given them some zip as a runner. James Conner has been incredible. Kyler Murray had 2 incompletions. The Jets have, underperformed expectations, no question, defensively, but they're still a formidable pass defense. Kyler was he was almost perfect.
Yeah.
In this game. Trey McBride, I know he only had 4 for 71. Oh my God, some of the plays that he was making out there, breaking tackles, and I think he had a hurdle. I mean, he is an absolute stud, definitely carrying the torch for the Mackey Award winners.
Yeah, he has a hurdle every week. I mean, dude is just a beast. If you don't know anything, you just turn on Red Zone or watch the game. I mean, Trey McBride absolutely jumps off the screen. Kyler only had 3 carries here, but 2 of them were for touchdowns, which is super encouraging that he'll run around the goal line. The other thought that I had is just this James Conner thing, man. They're 6-4 going into their bye. After they get out of their bye, they get to play the Seahawks twice. In week 16, James Conner plays the Panthers. In week 17, he plays the Rams. I mean, there are very few running backs I'd rather have right now than James Conner for the fantasy playoffs. Let's go to Atlanta. Really bad loss for the Falcons. I mean, really bad loss to an injury-ravaged Saints team. The goal line stuff was comical. I don't know if you saw this, Evan. In the first half, they get down to the 1 yard line. 3 straight Tyler Algier runs. He fails on all 3. They go to timeout, come back. Bijan's in the game. Easy walks in for a touchdown, and then Bijan just broke the slate from there. Floodgates were totally open for Bijan, but really bad loss. Evan, what do you think of Falcons game in New Orleans?
Yeah, bad real life loss, but we got what we wanted from the fantasy dudes. Even Kyle Pitts had 4 for 55, which is a solid number for any tight end. Algier, Bijan was an absolute beast in this game. Yeah, the Falcons missed 3 field goals. They had almost 500 yards of total offense. So the offense was humming. They just made a bunch of mistakes. You mentioned the stuffs at the goal line, missing field goals. That's how you blow a game like this.
Yeah. I would love to see Bijan with like Sean McVay as his coach. Like put Bijan out there for 95% of the snaps and see what happens. Guy is a total freak. Also, it was really good to see Drake London back in this game. Remember, he banged up his hip in week 10. He came right back here, 31% target share, 8 catches, 97 yards. It's just so predictable on the Falcons every week. We know who's going to play. We know who's going to be out there for every snap. We know where the targets are going to go. Like projections on Atlanta are like really, really solid each week. At Broncos Sunday, interesting game. Certainly not the best spot for Kirk Cousins to go outdoors here to face the Broncos. Let's move to the Dallas Cowboys now. I was wrong here, Evan. I thought Cooper Rush would play better, like much better, and he was awful. I mean, Cooper Rush threw for 45 yards before getting benched in garbage time. It certainly didn't help that CeeDee Lamb dropped an easy touchdown. He was blinded by the sun. It didn't help that Zeke Elliott, who was just suspended for conduct detrimental to the team, he fumbles around the goal line and they keep playing him. It didn't help, but still, I mean, really bad performance and concerning, I think, for CD and Ferguson, all these guys going forward from Cooper Rush. Evan, what do you think of Dallas in their first game without Dak?
Yeah, Cooper Rush also lost 2 fumbles. The Eagles' defense dominated. The Eagles' defense has been playing really well, by the way. They've won 5 games in a row, the Eagles. I know we're talking about the Cowboys here. I think that I also expected Cooper Rush to play better than he did. However, when you think about how poorly Dak or the offense was performing with Dak in there, I mean, it's been a dysfunctional situation from the start of the season. So now we're dropping a backup in. He doesn't have success against a defense that's on fire. In hindsight, we shouldn't be surprised. And I'll be interested to see. Oh, I think that they said that Cooper Rush is starting again.
They did, yes.
Yeah. But at some point, they're going to give the keys to Trey Lance, and he might be able to do something for you in 2 quarterback leagues. I did think that Rico Dowdle, he didn't have a big game statistically, but just watching him, I thought he looked pretty good. I mean, he's definitely the Cowboys' best back.
Every Ezekiel Elliott snap is a completely wasted snap. It is ridiculous. After he didn't show up to meetings and got suspended, now you're going to bring him in for a goal line carry. He fumbles, and then you bring him back in again. I mean, just, you got the sun blinding CeeDee Lamb's eyes. I mean, it's just total disaster. I mean, complete disaster. Last thing I'd say on Trey Lance, if he can't get ahead of Cooper Rush, I mean, how bad must Trey Lance be in practice if they don't want to play him ahead of Cooper Rush? After you give a 4th round pick for him. So I agree with Evan. He'll get there in fantasy if he gets in there based on running probably, but pretty scary. Let's go to Detroit. This was a wild Sunday night football game. Lions were bad. I mean, as bad as they could possibly play in the first half. They couldn't get any pressure. Stroud was shredding them. Goff was lost. Second half, they look like the Lions that we have come to expect here over the last couple of years in a 26-23 comeback win. Evan, what do you think of Lions win over the Texans?
Well, the Texans can really get after you from a pass rush standpoint. And the Texans, they've had all kinds of problems this year. I think they've lost 3 of their last 4 now. But that's one thing that is a constant is they can get after you with their front four, especially now that they have Danico Autry back, and that's what they did. And Jared Goff, has always been a fairly pressure sensitive quarterback. But then the Lions offensive line didn't hold up. And that's why you saw him he took 0 sacks actually, but the pressure rate against Jared Goff was really high. And that is what led to 5 interceptions. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you saw the post game stuff with Dan Campbell. The energy that dude brings when you compare him to like Matt Eberflus or something. I mean, it's no surprise that they can pull off comebacks like this, and they keep believing. They just keep believing.
Yeah.
And they're inspired by the head coach, no question.
The one fantasy note that I had was Sam Laporta was actually breaking out. Like Sam Laporta was getting a bunch of targets. He was playing really well. And then he sustained a shoulder injury. I think it's just day to day. I haven't seen too many updates there on Sam Laporta, but it's something to watch because he was earning a bit of a role there. Also, Jameson Williams made an insane catch. Like there was 2 defenders. One was in front of him. One was behind him. He makes the catch, gets hit from the front and hit from the back at the same time and held on. But he definitely got banged up there. So it would not surprise me if he misses some practice as well. So 2 things to keep an eye on there ahead of a really good spot in the schedule for Lions guys. Home against the Jaguars in the Dome, and then at the Colts in the Dome the week after that. I mean, every week Lions are going to be one of the favorites to score the most touchdowns every single week. Packers were on a bye. They will come out of it in week 11 here. Much needed bye, I think. Jordan Love was clearly not right before the bye. They'll get all wide receivers fully healthy. They play at the Bears this week and then a big home game against the 49ers. Evan, any thoughts for you on the Packers as they come out of their bye?
Just that. I mean, coming off the bye, I don't really have any big notes. Jordan Love should certainly, I mean, he was dealing with multiple injuries in his like groin and leg areas, so he needed that.
I know Jaden Reed hasn't done a great job earning targets this year, but playoff schedule, week 14 at Lions, week 15 at Seahawks, week 16, home versus New Orleans. Like those are spots where I think Jaden Reed is going to be a really good play, and I still want to have him on my team for sure. Rams. So this was the game last night. I thought this was just like a back-breaking loss for the Rams. You claw your way back to 4-4. You get some offensive line pieces back. You have Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp healthy. It's Monday night, huge home game, and you score 0 touchdowns against the Dolphins. I mean, that is really disappointing. On the good side, I thought Puka looked great. I thought Cooper Kupp also looked really healthy and great, but really bad loss here. Evan, what do you think of Rams game last night against the Dolphins?
Yeah, I think that Stafford has been pretty inconsistent all year. Greg Rosenthal, he was talking about this, and he's saying that he thinks that this has been Stafford's worst season in a long time. And I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. In games where they have Puka and Cooper Kupp, I mean, they should be lighting it up, and Kyren Williams, obviously. They should be lighting it up, and they did not do that against a defense that, the Dolphins have a competitive defense, but, certainly not a shutdown defense.
I mean, I love McVay. I think he's super sharp and an impressive guy. He is such a coward on these field goal decisions, man. I mean, such a coward. We're going on like multiple years now where he is kicking field goals where he should be going for it so often. I mean, so often. And it's hurting them. I think there's no doubt about that.
This game was last night. I have not looked at the snap and participation stuff. Was Davis Allen, I didn't see Colby Parkinson out there.
Yeah, this has been trending for a little bit now. It looks like they're done with Colby Parkinson. Colby Parkinson only 11 snaps in this game. Davis Allen 56. Davis Allen caught 5 balls on a 13% target share in this game. So yeah, it looks like a bit of a changing of the guard there. You have any thoughts on that, Evan? I thought Davis Allen was an interesting prospect. I'm just not sure there's enough targets to go around here for Davis Allen also.
Yeah, I kind of did too. I think it was last year or the year before. He got some playing time and he looked pretty decent. His athletic stuff isn't the greatest. So we'll see. I mean, at tight end these days, what do you have? 5 for 34 on 6 targets? Like that's usable.
Yeah. One more note for me on this. When Puka and Cooper Kupp have both been on the field together, the data is, and it's a small sample from this year, but the data has been very clear. Puka has been better at earning targets than Kupp. Kupp only had 7 targets in this game. Puka had 14. So, My lean is going to be Puka over Cup when forced to decide in spots here for DFS, but obviously it's going to be a bit volatile. They both, I think, looked great last night. At New England on Sunday are the Rams. Let's go to the Vikings here, Evan. This was the game that the Sam Darnold haters just were dying to see. They were waiting for it all year. There was like, stop talking about Sam Darnold. He sucks. He's going to turn back into a pumpkin. And that's what they got here. He threw 3 interceptions. Darnold had another one dropped. He had another interception called back by an illegal hands call. But because they were playing Mac Jones and the Jaguars, they still managed to win the game. Evan, concern level on Sam Darnold right now, and what do you think of the Vikings win against the Jaguars?
It's concerning because his history, Sam Darnold's history, is that he can play well in chunks and then things can spiral. So is this going to be the Sam Darnold of old where he allows this to spiral, or is he going to be able to bounce back? I don't know. Did you see Doug Peterson? Doug Peterson's the biggest jerk of like any head coach, but
Yeah.
talking about Sam Darnold, why do you think that Sam Darnold has had like somewhat of a revival? And he was just like, because Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
But then the Jaguars go out and lose to Sam Darnold when Sam Darnold plays like trash. But yeah, I mean, it's just, we're gonna have to see, is it gonna let it spiral?
I don't think it will, man. I have so much faith in Kevin O'Connell. And then he gets Hawkinson back. And Hawkinson was awesome in this game. 9 targets, 8 for 72. Obviously, Hawkinson is in every start week now, but he has Kevin O'Connell. He has Justin Jefferson. He has Hawkinson. He has Addison. Like, I think the support system is there for Darnold to not let it spiral this time. But Evan's 100% right, because like there were some times in Carolina I even thought Darnold's balling, man. And then it just bottom fell out. So
Even with the Jets, that was the case.
Yeah.
He would have like big time moments, stretches, and then horrible stretches. So we'll see. Aaron Jones got carted off at one point
and came back in.
And then came back in. Sounds like it was just like precautionary.
Yeah, it looked like a rib thing on Aaron Jones, and he was able to play through it. But I do think, and we talked about this on Sunday. I know Dink talked about it on Establish the Million. They need to get some work off of Aaron Jones. Like they need to get Cam Akers in there more, Ty Chandler. And I think that they want to do that, especially in games that they can control. Saints. Oh, it's just a great win for Darren Rizzi, the Riz Master General, they're calling him. First game since Dennis Allen fired. And the Riz Master beats the rival Falcons 20-17 at home. I mean, given that Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Bub Means, Cedric Wilson, Kendry Miller, Jamal Williams were all out, and they didn't get much from Juwan Johnson or Taysom Hill. I mean, super impressive win here. Evan, what do you think of Saints' first game in the post-Dennis Allen era?
Yeah, Derek Carr had like all day to throw in this game, which is a reminder that the Saints offensive line is like back together now, because they were missing 3 starters for a pretty long stretch there. They were missing their entire interior offensive line. The Falcons also have like 0 pass rush anyways. So when you combine those two, you see Derek Carr dropping back with 3 seconds to find Marquez Valdes-Scantling deep downfield for a bomb.
Yeah.
So I think that was kind of the story of this game. I mean, the Saints also made mistakes. I mean, Alvin Kamara had a horrible drop late in the game that almost cost them the game. But, I mean, Derek Carr played great, and he had great protection.
The Kamara role is just wild. And obviously he's their best pass catcher, arguably their best pass catcher, and their best runner, and their best goal line option. I mean, he had 17 carries and 6 targets here. Floor is absurd. Ceiling would have smashed if he caught that pass everyone was talking about. I know everybody's excited about Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He only ran 18 routes in this game. He only saw 3 targets. He turned that into 3-109-2. I think we know who Marquez Valdes-Scantling is. Like,
yes,
I'm not that excited about that. Taysom had an 80-yard touchdown catch called back by penalty. It still got him a 33-yard catch, but I played Taysom in cash on DraftKings at the tight end position this week, and like I felt pretty good about that. Like it didn't work out exactly the way that I wanted, but they were scoring long touchdowns. When they get closer to the goal line, I think we could see more Taysom also, and he's a viable start, I think, as long as all these guys are out.
One other note is that before the game, Chris Olave went on IR.
Yeah.
So he's out for at least 4.
I'm worried he's going to miss the rest of the season. And I'm obviously worried for him as a dude, just like the Tua stuff. I mean, Chris Olave has 5 known concussions. Like, if I was advising him, I'd probably tell him, well, I don't even want to say. I have no idea what the medical says or anything, but yeah, certainly scary on Chris Olave right now. Giants. Giants go to Germany as a 7-point favorite over the Panthers and lose. Now, Daniel Jones has had some solid games this year. No one wants to hear it. He's had some solid games this year. But then you also mix in this total ridiculous, inept floor stuff like we had on Sunday morning from Daniel Jones. And it's hard to even remember the solid games that he's had. The pressure to bench Daniel Jones right now is massive. Would not shock me if it happens immediately in ahead of their next game. Evan, what do you think of Giants' loss in Germany to the Panthers?
Yeah, Brian Dable after this game was asked whether Daniel Jones was going to keep the job, and he said we're evaluating. That's never a good sign for the in place starter. The Giants are 2-8. You know, they have a bye week coming up, so it's a good time, you know, theoretically to make a change. Yeah, they have their bye this week,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Yes. There's also a monetary thing here to consider that Daniel Jones has a $23 million injury guarantee for 2025. So if he were to suffer like, you know, I don't know, torn Achilles or something like that, they'd be on the hook for that.
Yep.
I think it's like 95% that they bench Daniel Jones.
Yeah, so the contract thing is similar to what Derek Carr got thrown out of the Raiders before it was technically over to save on the contract stuff. Russ Wilson with the Broncos, they benched him because of the same similar contract stuff that's in Daniel Jones' contract. So yeah, I agree. We're probably going to see Locke here sooner rather than later. I'm worried. I'm wondering what you think about Malik Neighbors here, Evan. People are starting to get worried. He had 10 targets here for a 27% share. I kind of think it's just A, randomness, and B, matchup based. I know the Panthers was a good matchup. He's had some tougher matchups before that, but after the bye, they get Tampa, Dallas, New Orleans, Baltimore, Atlanta, Indy. Those are awesome spots for Malik Neighbors. Do you think Locke will have any effect on Neighbors or any more Neighbors thoughts?
I mean, I don't, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say that Drew Lock is any kind of an upgrade on anybody.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it could get worse. And also, those matchups are sick. I mean, I think that Malik Neighbors is a buy.
Yeah. Tyron Tracy fumbled twice in this game, lost one. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Still 20 opportunities for him versus 9 for Singletary. Opportunities the last 2 weeks. Tyron Tracy 37, Singletary 16. I mean, this backfield belongs to Tyron Tracy. And given the situation around him, the offensive line, quarterback play, he's been one of the most impressive runners this year. I mean, Tyron Tracy's been super impressive. Eagles. Easy win for the Eagles over Cooper Rush's Cowboys. Game has never been close. We've talked so much about Eagles' schedule on here. I'm tired of talking about it, but he's going through it right now is Jalen Hurts, and he's going completely nuts. Evan, what did you think of Eagles' easy win in Dallas?
Yeah, the Eagles are looking like one of the most complete teams in the NFL right now. I mean, they've been rolling on defense. I remember early in the season, people were talking like I don't know, people were really down on the Eagles early in the season. They've ripped off 5 in a row, 3 of them by 20 or more points. They have so much talent on offense. They kind of had like a lot of mistakes in this game offensively. Jalen Hurts took a bunch of sacks, but they're so talented. Yeah, Jalen Hurts took 5 sacks, but they're so freaking talented at the skill positions and on the offensive line. I mean, and now they're rolling on defense. I mean, they look like a truly complete team. And you know, we know where to go every week. It's AJ Brown, it's Saquon Barkley, it's Devonta Smith. Although Devonta Smith didn't have a great game in this one. Dallas Goedert did get in the end zone. Dallas Goedert, by the way, check out his girlfriend online.
The Hurt stuff is crazy, man. With Saquon Barkley here and Jason Kelsey gone, I was like, oh, maybe he won't score as many rushing touchdowns. The Eagles have a magnet to the 1-yard line. Jalen Hurts is on pace now for 18 rushing touchdowns, would smash his previous career high. And you see how Barkley fails in game. I talked about this a little bit more on the solo pod. You know, it's not Barkley's fault. He played great, but Devonta Smith, AJ Brown, Goddard, it's hard to find targets. Hurts tucks and runs, and somehow the Eagles land on the one so much, you know. So you can have these floor games from Saquon Barkley, but he's gonna have so many ceiling games. It's so worth it. So worth it.
I saw somebody tweeted at Rich Rebar that he thinks a conspiracy theory that he thinks that the Eagles running backs just go down at the 1 because because they know that Jalen Hurts is so good at the tush push. So they're just like, it'll be easier if I just go down and we just tush push to Hurts.
Oh, God. Let's go to the Seattle Seahawks. So, big news for the Seahawks as they come out of their bye is we're expecting DK Metcalf back from his knee issue. We talked last week about what that means for Jackson Smith and Jigba. We'll find out quickly here as they have a very big game at San Francisco on Sunday. Do the Seahawks, Evan, any thoughts on Seattle as they come out of their bye?
Yeah, I'm expecting Noah Fant as well to be back. And then I just have I don't know what they're going to do with their offensive line situation. In their previous game, Geno was pressured on 60% of his dropbacks. That's been a problem all year, and it's just not really something that you can fix on the fly. Geno will hang in there. I mean, he's a stud. He's gotten to the point where he's got his pocket movement. I shouldn't even say his pocket presence, which is fine, but his movement in the pocket, he can maneuver away from that at times, but it gets ugly behind that pass protection. It's barely existent.
Well, that's what we talked about last week with Jackson Smith and Jigba. When your offensive line is struggling like that, maybe it's not the dumbest thing in the world to have JSN running these short routes to get the ball out quick. It's not great for fantasy, I don't think. The way JSN was used when DK Metcalf was out was awesome, but yeah, maybe they'll go back to that. And so it's going to be a really tough projection this week, I think, on Metcalf and JSN. Bucks continue to impress, man. I thought the 49ers would just come in there and clock them. That is not what happened. Bucks hang in once again. They had a chance to win the game. Can't pull it off. Lose 23-20 at home. Disappointing box score, I think, for Cade Otton in this game, but he still saw 27% of the targets, caught 5 of them for 35 yards. Evan, what do you think of Bucks' loss to the 49ers?
Yeah, and they're now going into their bye.
Correct.
It was another really nice game for Bucky Irving, who wound up with 16 touches. I mean, I haven't looked at the snaps yet on this game, but I think would we be in agreement that Bucky Irving is the Bucks' best running back?
As a runner, there's no doubt. And I'll give you the snaps here.
Yeah.
Most importantly, Sean Tucker played 0. Stone cold 0 for Sean Tucker, 37 for Rachaad White, 28 for Bucky Irving. I mean, Rachaad White's been great in the pass game, though. And with Mike Godwin.
And they love him in pass protection, too.
With Godwin and Evans out, Rachaad White's getting a ton of first read looks. They're going to their bye here, and I think they'll get Mike Evans back after that. Hopefully they'll get Mike Evans.
I think that's been the plan.
Yeah. Last thing I have on the Bucks, home game against Carolina in week 17. So it's a good one. Last NFC team is the Washington Commanders, aka the Washington football team. I thought Steelers defense did a really good job on Jaden Daniels, especially as a runner. I mean, they sacked him 3 times. They held him to 3 carries for 5 yards. Despite all that, the Commies still had a lead with 5 minutes left. They give up the late touchdown to Mike Williams to lose the game. Evan, what do you think of Commanders' loss to the Steelers?
Yeah, I mean, the Washington has been an offensive juggernaut all season. The Steelers were really able to, they have they're loaded up front, and Washington already doesn't have a great offensive line, and they have injuries on their offensive line going into this one. So the Steelers were able to keep him in the pocket, and he's obviously less dynamic in those instances. But another big game for Terry McLaurin, and that pretty much sums it up. I mean, this was one of the better games on Sunday for sure.
Brian Robinson did not play in this game, and so we were really struggling with the Austin Eckler projection, considering how little Austin Eckler played in the second half of week 9. We ended up with a pretty solid Eckler projection, and that paid off. He got 15 opportunities in this game compared to just 4 for McNichols and 2 for Chris Rodriguez. Most importantly, Eckler got the goal line touches here, and he's been so good at the goal line through his career, punched in 2 here. But Brian Robinson seems like he's been close. I would expect Brian Robinson back next week, but it's good to have some clarity on Eckler role.
Huge game coming up on Thursday night, Washington against Philadelphia. That matchup will be posted tonight.
Awesome. All right, let's move it over to the AFC now. Start with the Baltimore Ravens. This was the Thursday night game. I mean, wild game. As it often happens when the Ravens play the Bengals. 35-34 Ravens win here. Another 4-touchdown game for Lamar Jackson. To me, Lamar Jackson is playing on a different planet than he was last year when he won the MVP. Like
Yeah.
last year, I was like, I don't know if he's fine. He had a good season. I don't know if he deserves MVP or whatever. This year, he's been absolutely incredible. Evan, what do you think of Ravens' latest offensive outburst this time over the Bengals?
Yeah, it was an incredible game. The Bengals had a big lead at one point, or a fairly sizable lead at one point. But the Ravens are, you remember they used to get criticized as a team that couldn't come back. Well, like they can definitely come back now. And I give some of the credit to Todd Monken, but I also give, obviously a ton of credit to Lamar Jackson, and Rashad Bateman is having the best year of his career. And they've got Mark Andrews back rolling. And, I wonder about Mark Andrews. Was it really that car crash that wound up leading to him being very limited to open the season and used in? Isaiah Likely was out for this game.
Right.
But I do wonder if it was that car crash that happened. I think, was it during training camp?
Yeah, it was sometime over the summer. I don't remember exactly when. I know there's been speculation on that. He also had an injury last year, which maybe he wasn't fully recovered from. I've heard all that. But to me, it's the Likely thing that was the biggest difference. I mean, Mark Andrews had 34 routes on 36 Lamar dropbacks in this game. We have not seen usage like that for Mark Andrews all season. At most, he's been at like 60, 65% of the routes. So for him to run 34 out of 36 here, that's obviously a huge difference, gets a 21% target share. So yeah, I think when Isaiah Likely is out, I love playing Mark Andrews. Only other note I had was on this Deontay Johnson stuff. I mean, it was bad. He only ran 3 routes. He like fell down on one of his targets. Lamar was pissed at him. Deontay Johnson is not moving ahead of Rashad Bateman. I mean, we talked about this when it first happened. I still think it's going to be Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman in 2 wide receiver sets, and maybe Deontay Johnson gets in 3 wide receiver sets. So the NFL continues to think less of Deontay Johnson than the fantasy community does, I guess is my point.
Yeah, they got him for like nothing.
Yeah.
John Harbaugh did say that he anticipates his role increasing.
Yeah.
But I mean, how could it be any smaller?
Right. He ran 3 routes.
Right.
Bills went to Indianapolis without Amari Cooper, without Keon Coleman, who's going to be out for a little bit. They got some huge defensive plays, which can happen when you play Joe Flacco, and they roll the Colts 30-20. Don Kincaid got hurt in this game, knee injury. I don't know how severe that is. Seems like he's day-to-day. And then also Keon Coleman, as I mentioned, is going to be out a few weeks. Evan, what do you think of Bills win at Indy?
Yeah, I mean, they also continue to have like one of the best running games in the league, which we saw over the last 5 games of last season when Joe Brady took over as their OC. That's when they really got it rolling, and they really leaned into it. They're leaning into it big time this season. They're like sort of a defense-oriented, running game-oriented team, or at least they can be that, especially when they're missing 2 of their best receivers. So I mean, they're 8-2. They got a huge game coming up against KC.
Yeah.
There's some good games on tap. We got asked about Mac Hollins on Sunday morning, and I kind of shot it down, and he wound up leading the team in receiving. So my bad on that. I mean, he didn't really help you too much in fantasy, but I mean, he did have 86 yards on 4 catches.
Yeah, the big one for me, for DFS people out there, was like when the defense hits like that, James Cook comes along for the ride. They ran the ball so much, and James Cook plays well here. Defense gets some pick sixes, and you see how that correlation can play out in DFS. Khalil Shakir continues to be this like extreme low ADOT. I'm talking like 2.9 yards, 3 yards ADOT, but catch rate's going to be great in that. And you got 24% share of the targets. Anytime Amari Cooper and Keon Coleman are out, and if Don Kincaid misses again, Shakir is going to be an awesome play, I think, pretty clearly.
Yeah, and if Kincaid misses again, we'll be talking about Dawson Knox, I expect, as well.
Yeah, Kincaid's run so bad. He was wide open for a touchdown in this game, and Allen just like airmailed him, and really unlucky season for Dalton Kincaid, I think, but also maybe he's just not good enough. I mean, he's clearly not as good as Trey McBride, who is being drafted kind of in the same range. Bengals. I mean, this was the Thursday game again, and Ravens secondary has not been able to stop Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase for years now. I mean, nothing new on Thursday. Jamar Chase with one of the best wide receiver games you can possibly play. 11 catches, 264 yards, 3 touchdowns. I don't know what there is to say, man. He was absolutely unstoppable, but the Ravens have been giving up outrageous wide receiver games all year long. Evan, what do you think of Bengals' narrow loss to the Ravens on Thursday night?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big takeaway is just that Jamar Chase was unstoppable. I mean, every time I looked up, I felt like he was ripping off another 35 or 50-yard gain. He was unbelievable. Chase Brown had 22 touches in this
Mm-hmm.
game, so they continue to show, that they believe that he can be a workhorse to an extent. Zach Moss might be out for the year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say that for sure. He's certainly on IR and he's going to miss at least 3 more games. They did trade for Khalil Herbert, but I think that he'll end up just being a change of pace back for Chase Brown. And Chase Brown, like the fact that Zach Moss is gone is so huge for his passing game role.
Yeah.
Like he's going to be using it. He had 9 catches in this game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, on Chase Brown, I'll say this: like when Jamar Chase wasn't open deep, it was just a check down to Chase Brown. Chase Brown had 9 catches on 11 targets in this game. The official running back touches in the 2 games where Zach Moss has been out so far. Chase Brown, 54 touches in those 2 games. Everyone else, 0. They did try to give Khalil Herbert a touch in this game on Thursday night, but they botched the exchange. Fumble was credited to Joe Burrow. And then on Monday, they go out and sign Gary Brightwell, who had like a cup of coffee with the Giants, I believe. They also worked out Leonard Fournette, and they didn't sign Leonard Fournette. They signed Gary Brightwell. So it's just the Chase Brown show, man. I'm so like, I've had a horrible, horrible, horrible best ball season. Seemingly, we'll see how it ends up, but maybe Chase Brown can save me because he's one of my most owned running backs for sure. Oh, I have to give a shout out to the preseason DFS Hall of Famer Tanner Hudson popped up here for a huge game. I mean, how has Tanner Hudson not gotten more snaps and routes in his NFL career? He has been the Crash Davis of August football for a very long time. He actually outproduced Mike Gesicki here, but I don't really want to start either of those guys if T. Higgins gets back, and I kind of think T. Higgins is going to be back this week, but we'll see. Let's go to the Browns. Browns were on their bye. They will come out of it for a really good spot against the Saints in a Jameis Winston revenge game. Kevin Stefanski already confirmed that Jameis Winston will be starting in this game. It's just such a good setup for fantasy. The Browns are 2-7. They have nothing to lose. Jameis might as well chuck it up there. Tillman, Njoku, Judy, Elijah Moore. I'm actually excited for Browns offense going forward. Evan, anything for you on Browns as they come out of their bye?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I don't really have any big notes on them because they're coming off the bye, but this is going to be a good matchup for the Browns. I know that the Falcons only put up 17, but they put up almost 500 total yards.
Yeah.
Like this Saints defense is a sieve.
It's a great matchup. And yeah, we saw Nick Chubb get a ton of volume before the bye and have really bad efficiency. Maybe that flips, but either way, like his role has been better than I thought it would be off of injury. So we'll see on Nick Chubb. Texans. So as I mentioned in the first half of that Sunday night game against the Lions, I mean, I thought Stroud was playing the best he played all year. He was so accurate. He was so good with Nico Collins out once again and Steph Diggs done. And in the second half, as Evan mentioned, I mean, offensive line falls apart. Whole thing falls apart. And Stroud limps to the finish line in a loss. Evan, what do you think of Texans' narrow defeat to the Lions?
Yeah, this is also a game where they had like just horrible running game efficiency. And I think that the offensive line for Houston continues to be one of the biggest, most disappointing units of the season. I do think Nico Collins will be back this week, which will be huge.
Yes.
Because it seemed like he was close. I mean, there were people who thought that he was going to play on Sunday, and obviously he didn't. But I think he'll be ready to go in Week 11.
I really do think that'll make a difference. I mean, you're talking about one of the best wide receivers in the league. I think it'll make a difference for this entire offense. Week 11 against Dallas is a great spot for Nico Collins to return. It was great to see John Mechie balling. When they dumped Noah Brown, I was like, oh man, it's Mechie season. I mean, John Mechie caught 96 balls as a junior at Alabama. I've seen enough of Xavier Hutchinson. I don't know what you think about this, Evan, but given that John Mechie broke out here, is it possible we could get Dell and Nico on the outside and Mechie as the slot receiver rest of season? Because in that case, I'm actually kind of interested in Mechie. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's been weird with Mechie. Apparently they wanted to trade him at one point. He's really struggled to get on the field. Xavier Hutchinson, he's had games where he played a ton of snaps and just did nothing. So yeah, I think that they, he's got a big body. He's bigger than John Mechie. But yeah, you're right. And now that they're looking at a slot guy, John Mechie. A lot of people actually compared him to Robert Woods when he was coming out of Alabama. He had that injury. He had leukemia.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been through a lot. I think he could jump into the slot. I mean, that makes sense on paper, at least.
Yep. Colts. So it was very important, once again, that Anthony Richardson sit on the sideline and watch Joe Flacco throw a pick six, almost throw another pick six, throw 3 interceptions, take 4 sacks, have a 21.9 QBR. Very important that Anthony Richardson sits on the sideline and watches Joe Flacco play like that here. They were never really in it against the Bills. The Colts were never really in it. Evan, any thoughts on Colts' performance here in a loss to Buffalo?
Yeah, Flacco threw a pick six on the first pass of the game. Um, the Colts say they're sticking with him. So it is what it is. I mean, they're still like in the playoff race, even though they're
Yeah.
4-6.
And to be clear, like I'm mostly joking. I do think Flacco gives them a better chance to win than Anthony Richardson, but like qualifying for the playoffs and losing in the first round, that wouldn't be my personal goal. My personal goal, if I was running the Colts, would be to have Anthony Richardson fulfill his potential or figure out that he sucks and we need to move on. But,
Yeah.
whatever.
Also, Josh Downs, he had 10 targets in this game, 7 for 72, dropped a touchdown that could have made it a lot bigger.
Yeah.
But I mean, continues to be a guy that vacuums in targets.
I mean, Flacco's great for the wide receivers. Alec Pierce caught a bomb here, talked about him a bunch with Daigle on the waiver show. Josh Downs should have had a much bigger game. He still got 7 for 72. And then A.D. Mitchell with Michael Pittman's sideline, 60 of 64 snaps. Caught all 6 of his targets for 71 yards, 37 routes on 39 dropbacks. A.D. Mitchell looks like a different player out there compared to some of like the more stiff stuff we've seen from Michael Pittman. I don't know what they're going to do when Michael Pittman gets back. If it was me, I would bench Alec Pierce and play A.D. Mitchell with Downs and Pittman, but I don't know that they're going to do that. Evan, any thoughts on Mitchell rest of the season?
I just thought it was a really promising game because I was worried because the game before that, it looked like he was behind Ashton Doolin. But this was an awesome game for A.D. Mitchell, for him to go out there and get that kind of run and get that kind of production. As we talked about, like it's just a matter of him holding on to the football and not making mistakes because he's an awesome athlete.
Yeah. Last note I had here was Jonathan Taylor. Like, Bills are an awesome team to use running backs against. They dare you to run. They give up a bunch of running back catches. He got 4 targets here, so good to see on JT. I like for all this stuff, for Pierce, for Mitchell, for JT, at some point, if they fall out of it, they're going to get Anthony Richardson back out there, and that won't be great. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're making bids. Again, talk to Daigle more about that on the waiver show. Jaguars. Mac Jones starts in place of an injured Trevor Lawrence here. They stayed in the game, did the Jaguars, because Sam Darnold was terrible, but Mac Jones was equally as bad. 22 pass attempts led to 111 yards, no touchdowns, 3 sacks, a 12 QBR. I mean, I thought Mac Jones would fail, but this was an utter faceplant from Mac Jones. Evan, was this because they were playing the Vikings, or is this what we're going to get from Brian Thomas and Evan Ingram type stuff the rest of the year?
This is another offense where even when Trevor Lawrence is in there, everything seems difficult.
Yeah.
They've had some decent games. They've sprinkled in some decent games offensively, but for the most part, I mean, the offense is just – I just think that the game has kind of passed by Doug Peterson, and there's no easy buttons in the offense, and so that's not going to work against Brian Flores with Mac Jones in there. There have been rumors that Trevor Lawrence might need shoulder surgery, which would probably end his season. I think they were started by Jay Gruden, actually.
Yeah, so
you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. Jay Gruden had speculated on it. So I think Trevor Lawrence, the report is that he's reviewing all his options. It is an AC joint injury similar to the one that Anthony Richardson had surgery on and ended his season last year. Trevor Lawrence is reportedly still gathering options, whether he's going to go through with a surgery or not. The only good news is it's on his non-throwing arm. So, I think it's 50-50 right now, whether T-Law comes back or he's done. I honestly don't know.
They're 2-8.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
There's not too much to come back for.
Tank Bigsby left this game with an ankle injury, which obviously is really good for Travis Etienne. but matchups aren't great. And if he has Mac Jones, they're playing the Lions, the Texans, the Titans next. With Mac Jones, it's going to be tough for ETN, but he will be a feature back, I think. And then, yeah, on Brian Thomas, man. I mean, Brian Thomas got a lot of his production from Trevor Lawrence deep down the field. I don't know about that with Mac Jones. And I love Brian Thomas. I think he's a baller, but I'm scared about him with Mac Jones. Just a tough run out here for pretty much every wide receiver who was a good pick this season. Chiefs. I don't know how. Chiefs remain undefeated. They're 9-0. They got outplayed by the Denver Broncos in Arrowhead, somehow win on a blocked field goal. Mahomes was forced to drop back in this game 49 times. That's easily Mahomes' most dropbacks of the season, but only 5 targets, 12% share for DeAndre Hopkins here. Evan, what did you think of Chiefs' lucky-ish win over the Broncos?
Yeah, and Hopkins wound up seeing a lot of Patrick Surtain. Things were getting chippy out there. I'll say this. I think that the Broncos defense is not fraudulent. They are really good up front, and they really harassed Patrick Mahomes in this game. The Chiefs lost Wanya Morris, and they had to go back to Kingsley Suamatia at left tackle, and he's been a problem when they've had to play him. And so that was, one of the reasons why this game didn't have many points, is because Patrick Mahomes was under a ton of pressure.
Xavier Worthy fails again. 37 more routes, 4 targets, 1 catch for 11 yards. I mean, we talked about dropping Xavier Worthy last week, a couple weeks ago, and I was fine with it. It's just not working. The good news for the Chiefs is Isaiah Pacheco is expected to have his practice window opened this week. They'll have 21 days to designate him for on the active roster. So, yeah, it looks like Pacheco is going to be back. What do you think, Evan, about Pacheco versus Kareem Hunt rest of season and how the usage will go there if and when Pacheco gets back?
I think Pacheco's a lot better than Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt has been fine as a grinder. He's been good in short yardage and goal line, but Pacheco just brings a lot more juice than Kareem Hunt does. Kareem Hunt gives you no big run capability, and Pacheco can do that.
Yep. Vegas, they'll come out of their bye to play the Dolphins on Sunday. In the game before the bye, remember Gardner Minshew started, Ritter finished the game. We had Alexander Madison as the feature back. I mean, to me, the only thing that matters on the Raiders is that Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers combine for anywhere from 15 to 20 targets per game. And I think they'll do that. I'm not saying it's going to be super productive every week, but those guys need, and I think will get 15 to 20 targets a game combined. Evan, anything for you on Raiders as they come out of their bye?
I would be hoping if I have Jacoby Myers or Brock Bowers that they stick with Gardner Minshew, because in the last game they benched him for Desmond Ritter, who's barely been in the offense. They just changed their offensive coordinator and their passing game coordinator and their offensive line coach. So that's a lot to deal with. You want Minshew in there. Minshew can complete passes. I mean, we know that. So we'd prefer him in there for fantasy.
Let's go to the Chargers. Chargers moved to 6-3 by dominating Will Levis and the Titans. The big story to me was the return of Gus Edwards. I knew that Gus Edwards would probably be ahead of Vidal because this staff absolutely loves Gus Edwards, and that was the case. Gus Edwards' first game off of injury, Kimani Vidal is inactive. What surprised me more was that right out of the gate, they were giving Gus Edwards base snaps ahead of J.K. Dobbins, and Gus Edwards only played 14 snaps in this game, but he had 10 carries. And so Dobbins finishes with 14 carries. Hassan Haskins scored a 1-yard rushing touchdown. It's just not the cleanest for J.K. Dobbins, but I get, and I think it's smart that they don't want to completely load him up with touches here as we hit the halfway point. Evan, thoughts on Chargers win over the Titans?
I thought it was nice. Justin Herbert really performed well as a runner.
Yeah.
And if you think about the history of Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh, I mean, Kaepernick, Tyrod, Lamar Jackson, Andrew Luck, Josh Johnson. Jim Harbaugh coached Josh Johnson when he was in college. And all those dudes are great athletes. So is Justin Herbert.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'll be interested to see if they lean into that.
They called a designed run for Justin Herbert. It wasn't an RPO. It was a literal designed run for Justin Herbert from the 5-yard line, and he scored on it. I mean, so yeah.
That would be nice to add to his repertoire because, he's still not throwing the ball very much. I mean, he had 18 attempts in this game. Super efficient. Hit Quentin Johnston for a pretty long touchdown. They got Quentin Johnston matchup on a linebacker, and he beat him for that. But the volume just I'm just not sure that it's ever going to consistently be there, even though they're throwing it more on early downs. And the pass rate is up. It's just still pretty low compared to the rest of the league.
Last note I had on the Chargers was that Hayden Hurst appears to have been completely iced by Will Dissly. Will Dissly is like playing almost every snap now. I don't think he's not explosive, but he's going to earn targets. I think he's going to get 3 to 6 targets a game the rest of the season. Will Dissly. Dolphins. They went into LA last night, get a 23-15 win over the Rams. Big story to me is the Tyreek Hill stuff. So he was listed questionable for this game. Seemed legit questionable due to what he is calling a torn ligament in his wrist. He told Lisa Salters that it started in training camp, the pain in his wrist. He aggravated it during his arrest outside the stadium ahead of week 1, and he's been playing through it. And so some people are like, oh, he's just trying to get a civil suit against the Miami cops. And other people are saying, oh, this is why he's underperformed this season. I don't know the answer there, but like for Tyreek Hill to only have 14% target share, 316-1 in a really good matchup against the Rams, that's not Tyreek Hill to me. So something does feel off here. Evan, any thoughts on Tyreek and any other Dolphins thoughts?
Yeah, he's also like on the wrong side of 30.
Yeah.
I don't. That didn't make sense because that was actually his best game of the season. Was the game that occurred? I don't think he got arrested.
Yeah, detained or what? Week 1. Week 1
Right.
was his best game. Yeah.
Yeah, that was his best game, and that happened. Wouldn't he be more healthy now than after the aggravation or whatever he claims occurred?
Yeah, you would think.
That doesn't make sense logically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Devon Achane played 70% of the snaps in this game. He did not have a big game, but he did have 5 more catches.
Yeah. Snaps were Achane 37, Jalen Wright 9, Mostert 8. I just wanted to note that Jalen Wright got 5 carries in this game and Mostert got 0.
Well, Mostert had been fumbling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. But yeah, I think that's a spot to watch. And then the Dolphins are now 3-6. They play the Raiders and the Patriots at home in their next 2 games. I mean, I'm worried about Tyreek Hill. Like, he's going to be cheap. He was already pretty cheap in DFS, and I'm going to have to think about that a lot because I love Tyreek Hill. I love playing him in DFS due to these like huge explosive days that he can have, but something feels off to me there on Tyreek Hill right now.
One note on Tua, since he came back from his latest concussion, he's completing 78% of his passes with a 106 passer rating.
Yeah.
So he's been very, very efficient. You can at least see that the offense is functional again, even when they don't have big offensive outputs, which they didn't against the Rams. They got the victory, but it wasn't a big offensive day.
Patriots go into Chicago and dominate the Bears. This was the game that got Shane Fraudron fired. They sacked Caleb Williams 9 times, win the game 19-3. Run heavy game. I mean, Drake May only attempted 25 passes. They got off 31 running back carries. Anything for you, Evan, on Patriots win in Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, I just say that that's their formula if they want to be competitive in games is to, play the best defense that they can, run the ball with volume, and use Drake May's dual threat capability because, I mean, the passing game they need more weapons, period. And you don't want them dropping back that often behind that offensive line.
Yeah. I mean, I thought Hunter Henry was like an okay play here against the Bears, but you see what happens. I mean, they're so low volume. They're so inefficient. Austin Hooper happens to get a couple targets, and then Hunter Henry is total dust, So I really don't like clicking on any of these guys on a weekly basis. Jets. This was it, man. Jets are officially cooked. I mean, we already knew that the Jets were cooked, but it is official now. They go to Arizona and lose 31-6 to fall to 3-7. We'll talk about the offense from a high level perspective. To me, the defense is the story. They can't stop anyone. I confidently played Marvin Harrison this week, and I never thought that I would have done that against Sauce and DJ Hall. So, I mean, they're bad on offense. They're bad on defense. I mean, you got to think the Jets are like one of the worst teams in the league right now. Evan, what do you think of Jets' latest meltdown this time in Arizona?
Yeah, they are. They also got out coached, which has been happening all season.
Yeah.
The Cardinals just play like a zone, and the Jets can't do anything except for dump downs in the passing game, and Garrett Wilson. I mean, they got Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams, for God's sakes, and you can't make plays down the football field. Yeah, you got Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. Like your offense is broken if you can't do that against the Cardinals too. I mean, the strategy was good by the Cardinals, but I mean the Cardinals personnel isn't very impressive defensively. We've known that.
Yeah. I mean, Devontae Adams underperformed his expectation in fantasy by 14.1 points. I mean, he's going to be 32 next month, Devontae Adams, and they got to build the offense more around Garrett Wilson to me and Brees. I mean, Brees was good in this game, but he only got 14 opportunities. They just can't sustain drives, so it's really, really rough right now for the Jets. Last team to get to today is the Tennessee Titans. So Will Levis was back from his shoulder injury in the saddle for the Titans. He took 7 sacks, and Mason Rudolph was not doing that. I guess the good news is that Will Levis was able to keep Calvin Ridley hot here. Calvin Ridley did have a touchdown in garbage time, but he's still 5 catches, 84 yards, 2 touchdowns for Calvin Ridley against a pretty good Chargers defense is encouraging. Evan, what do you think of Titans' loss to the Chargers?
Yeah, 7 sacks on 30 dropbacks. That is insane.
Yeah.
But also not that surprising because we know how Will Levis plays. And I mean, this was a huge issue for him as a rookie. He obviously isn't getting it. And they had this swinging gate on the right side of the offensive line. And then they lost Lloyd Cushenberry, their high-priced center, to a torn Achilles. So their offensive line is doomed. And so are the Titans. As long as Will Levis is a quarterback.
Yeah, I saw Pollard got banged up a bit in this game. He's carrying such a big workload, or he has carried such a big workload. In this game, it was 9 Pollard carries and 7 Tajay Spears carries. I feel like workhorse Tony Pollard is probably not going to be a thing the rest of the way. Like, they're not going to run him into the ground. I still think he'll be ahead of Tajay Spears, but not, you're not going to get the same type of projection or workload that you got when Spears was out, obviously. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of the Team by Team podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, as I recommend that you do us a favor and hit the subscribe button. We can continue to bring you free content like this through the rest of the season and into the off season. For Evan, producer Luke, producer Ryan, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.